So, today we're going to dive into a concept that might just change the way you think about autism, communication, and maybe even healthcare itself. It's called the triple empathy problem, and trust me, it challenges some of our most basic, long held assumptions. But before we get into the theory, I want to start with a number that should really stop you in your tracks. Minus 16 years. That's the average reduction in life expectancy for an autistic person. This isn't just some abstract statistic, it's a massive health crisis, and we absolutely have to understand what's driving it. Which leads to the big question, right? Why? What is causing this devastating gap? Well, the answer is complicated. And to get there, we have to completely re-examine what we even think we know about empathy. So let's start by unpacking the old story, the one that really dominated our thinking for decades. It was a story built almost entirely on the idea of deficits. For years, the main way of looking at this was what's called a deficit model. Basically, the theory said that autistic people couldn't really understand what was going on in other people's minds, and that's what led to what was labeled impaired social interaction. The most important takeaway from this old way of thinking: the problem was seen as being located entirely inside the autistic person. It was their problem, their deficit to fix. But what if that whole framework was wrong? Or at least fundamentally incomplete? In recent years, a totally new theory has come along that completely flips the script. And this, my friends, is where things get really, really interesting. This is the double empathy problem, a groundbreaking concept from an autistic researcher named Damian Milton. And what he argued is that the communication breakdown between autistic and non-autistic people isn't a one-way street at all. It's actually a mutual problem where understanding fails in both directions. So it's not about one person having empathy and the other person not having it. It's about two people who are basically operating with different social norms, different sensory experiences, different communication styles. And this creates a huge gap between them, where, neurotypical people struggle to understand the autistic experience, and autistic people struggle right back. And this is the absolute core of it. The double empathy problem totally reframes the conversation. We move away from a story about deficiency, the idea that something is broken or missing, and we move toward a story about difference. The key is shifting from seeing an empathy deficiency to seeing an empathy difference. It's a whole new lens for looking at the world. Now, this idea of a two-way empathy gap is a massive step forward. But what happens when you take that dynamic and you drop it into a really high-stakes environment, like a hospital or a doctor's clinic? Well, that's when the problem gets even more complex. I mean, just imagine it. You're in a doctor's office. The fluorescent lights are buzzing, the paperwork is confusing, and you're trying your best to explain a really complex health issue. In that kind of environment, the double empathy problem can get amplified big time. And that brings us to the triple empathy problem. It takes that initial gap between an autistic and a non-autistic person, and then adds a third barrier: the professional culture of medicine itself. I mean, think about it. This culture has its own jargon, its own set of priorities, and its own unwritten rules about what it means to be a good patient. You can see it really clearly here in this diagram. You've got the neurodivergent experience in one circle, the neurotypical experience in another, and that gap between them, that's the double empathy problem we were just talking about. But in a medical setting, you add this third circle for the professional. Now you've got three potential disconnects all happening at once, which makes mutual understanding incredibly difficult. And this isn't just some abstract, theoretical problem. It has devastating, real-world consequences. It creates this tragic cycle that often starts with a simple communication mismatch that can leave the patient feeling doubted or disrespected. That, in turn, can lead to fear and helplessness around getting medical care, and eventually, to healthcare avoidance. People just stop going to the doctor. Which brings us right back to where we started: adverse health outcomes and that 16-year gap. And on top of that communication gap, the clinical environment itself can be a huge barrier. We're talking bright lights, overwhelming sounds, the challenge of trying to interpret your own body's signals, like where exactly is that pain coming from? And let's not forget the logistical nightmare of just scheduling an appointment. All of it can make a doctor's visit feel like a monumental task. Okay, so we've mapped out the problem. It's big, it's complex. So now what? How do we fix it? Well, the good news is that understanding the triple empathy problem also gives us a pretty clear roadmap for solutions. It's time we move from just talking about the theory to taking real neuroinclusive action. A really powerful guiding principle here is a concept called cultural compatibility. It's a blend of two crucial ideas. First, you've got cultural competence, which basically means that healthcare providers and designers need to actually learn the facts about the autistic experience. But just as important is cultural humility, the ability to recognize your own biases and be genuinely open to learning from the lived experiences of autistic people themselves.
This kind of mindset then translates into real, concrete actions. It means offering different ways for people to communicate, like maybe allowing a patient to write down their symptoms before an appointment. It means getting rid of demands for neurotypical social norms like mandatory eye contact. It means using universal design, designing spaces to be accessible for the widest possible range of people, to create sensory-friendly rooms with dimmable lights or quiet waiting areas. And it's about making those unwritten rules explicit, so there's no more guesswork. You see, these aren't just special accommodations. They're just principles for better design for absolutely everyone.
At the end of the day, this triple empathy problem isn't just a challenge for doctors and therapists. It exists in our workplaces, in our schools, in our communities. We are all, in our own way, designers of the social world around us. So the final question I want to leave you with is this. Now that you understand the problem, how will you help close the gap?